Ever feel like, like you're just kind of standing in your own way? Like there are these invisible roadblocks, holding you back from really getting what you want?
Yeah.
And you're not alone. A lot of people are finding out about this thing called the Sedona Method.
Right.
To kind of break through those barriers. And that's what we're diving into today.
Okay.
We looked at this really interesting episode of the Jack Canfield podcast, where Canfield, he chats with Hale Dwoskin. He's like the expert on the Sedona Method.
Yeah, and it's so interesting how that episode really points out this idea that it's not just about, like thinking positive all the time.
Right.
It's more about understanding and really releasing those negative emotions.
Yeah.
The ones that might actually be the root cause of all those roadblocks.
Okay, so for anyone who's totally clueless, who is this Hale Dwoskin guy?
Okay.
And why should we listen to him?
Well, Hale Dwoskin, he didn't just appear out of nowhere.
Right.
He actually learned this method directly from his mentor, a guy named Lester Levinson.
Okay.
And Levinson, he's kind of a big deal in the personal development world.
Okay.
So it's like this cool lineage.
That's right.
This knowledge passed down, which gives it, another level of credibility.
Yeah, totally.
And, Dwoskin's been featured in all sorts of places like the New York Times, even the movie Letting Go.
Wow.
So, yeah, he's definitely not some random guy.
He's got the street cred. Okay, but for someone who's hearing about the Sedona Method for the very first time, how would you sum it up? What's the elevator pitch?
Okay, imagine your emotions, right? But as energy. And sometimes that energy gets all stuck, like a traffic jam, in your system.
Yeah.
The Sedona Method, it's kind of like a process of directing traffic. You're releasing that stuck energy.
Okay.
So you can experience way more peace and even joy.
I like that. So it's not about pretending the negative emotions aren't there. It's about saying, hey, I see you.
Exactly.
And then learning how to let them go.
Exactly. The podcast, it touches on this idea that holding on to negativity, whether it's, like a bad breakup, a super frustrating day at work,
right,
or even those pesky limiting beliefs we all have.
Oh, tell me about it.
It's like carrying around all this extra weight.
Yeah.
That's holding us back from truly experiencing life,
Totally. It's like that saying, holding on to anger is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. It just doesn't work that way.
Exactly.
And so that's where these 3 core questions come in, right?
Yes.
The ones Dwoskin talks about in the podcast.
Yes, precisely. It's like this journey of self-discovery.
Okay.
And it starts by simply asking yourself, could I let this go?
Okay.
And now this isn't about forcing yourself to just magically let go.
Right.
It's more about acknowledging that, hey, releasing this emotion, it is actually possible.
It's like opening yourself up to just the idea that you have a choice.
Exactly. And then that takes you to the second question. Would I let this go?
Okay.
This is where you actually make a conscious choice. Do you want to keep holding on to this anger?
Right.
This frustration? Or would you rather just be free from it?
And that's huge, right? Just even realizing you do have that choice.
Right.
But I feel like sometimes just knowing you could let go of something and then actually doing it, those are 2 very different things.
Oh, totally.
That's where that third question comes in though, right?
Yes. That third question, when? That's where we really see what's going on.
Yeah.
It's about taking action right now. Right now.
Okay.
Not just sitting there thinking about the emotion, but really making that choice to let it go.
Wow.
In this moment.
It reminds me of that quote, I think it was Marie Forleo who said it, something like, clarity comes from action, not thought.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that.
And this process, it seems like it really encourages that active choice.
Right.
To just shift that emotional state you're in.
Yes. And it's fascinating how the episode, it really dives into how this all ties into breaking free from those patterns. Those self-sabotaging patterns we all have.
Yes.
Know about.
Like when we just keep procrastinating on something big.
Right. Or the same arguments again and
exactly.
again.
It's like we're stuck.
Oh, totally. It's like we're just playing the same old tapes in our minds.
Exactly. And often those patterns, they come from these really deep beliefs, ones we might not even realize are there.
Wow.
But the Sedona Method, it helps us see those beliefs.
Okay.
Really understand where they come from,
Yeah.
And then finally dismantle the whole thing.
So it's not just about trying to change what you're doing. It's about understanding the why behind it.
Exactly.
And I think this is where that idea of boundlessness comes in.
Yes. This idea that as we let go of those negative emotions and those limiting beliefs,
right,
it opens us up to this completely new way of being.
Exactly. It's not just about like feeling a bit better, you know?
Yeah.
It's about this huge change in how you see yourself
Right.
and the entire world around you.
Wow.
It's about getting to that place inside you that's totally free.
Yeah.
Free from the old patterns, the limiting beliefs, all of it.
So how do we take all of this and actually use it in our lives? Like, what are some real practical ways
Yeah.
we can start using the Sedona method, especially with everyday stuff? Because it's easy to talk about, like, letting go of negativity, but then you're hit with a crazy deadline at work.
Right, exactly.
Or you're having an argument with someone you love. Like, how do we actually use this stuff in those moments?
Well, that's where those practical techniques come in.
Okay.
Gwoskin, in the podcast, he talks about 5 ways of letting go.
Okay.
And they're actually surprisingly simple.
Okay. I'm listening.
One that really stuck with me, it's called the waterfall technique.
The waterfall technique.
Yeah,
Okay.
so imagine you're standing under a waterfall
Okay.
and all those like heavy negative emotions you're carrying around,
Yeah.
those are like leaves falling on top of your head.
Oh, okay.
But instead of just letting them pile up, weighing you down,
Right.
you just gently let the water carry them away.
Okay.
It's about like surrendering that resistance we all have
Yeah.
and just letting those emotions flow through you.
I love that visual. It makes it seem so much easier.
Yeah,
It's not about pretending you don't have those emotions, right?
exactly. Yeah,
It's more like you see them, you feel them,
right.
but then you just let them move through you.
Exactly. And I think that's the beauty of the Sedona method.
Okay.
It's not about being happy all the time,
Right.
like never having a negative thought.
Because that's impossible.
Exactly. We're human.
Right.
It's about having the tools to deal with all of it,
Okay.
all those emotions, but with more awareness.
So we're not just reacting to everything.
Exactly.
More like we're actually in control of our inner world.
Yes. And you know what really resonated with me
What's that?
was how Dwoskin emphasized that this is a journey.
Okay.
It's not about like arriving at some perfect state of being.
Right.
It's about practicing day after day
Yeah.
and really understanding those emotional patterns we all have.
And so as you go about your day today, dear listener,
Yeah.
remember this. You have more power than you realize
Right.
to choose how you respond to all of it.
That feeling of being stuck,
Yeah.
The Sedona method says it doesn't have to be forever.
Okay.
It can be a pathway to something better,
I love that.
more freedom, more fulfillment, if you're willing to give it a try.
Exactly. And if you want to learn more, make sure you check out Hale Dwoskin's book.
Yes.
It's called The Sedona Method.
And that podcast episode.
Yes. Great episode. It just might unlock a whole new level of inner peace for you.
Like so.
Until next time, keep diving deep, friends.
Okay, so meditation.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like we all have an idea about it,
Yeah.
right? But like, maybe we've got it all wrong?
Mm-hmm.
We've all seen the pictures, monks on mountaintops looking like super zen.
Yeah.
Makes it feel a little intimidating,
For sure.
Like, is this even for me? Meditation.
Right.
And that's what we're going to pack today.
Okay.
We've got this article, Meditation is Easy. So what's your excuse?
Okay.
And it basically says most of us are missing the point.
Interesting.
So it dives right into debunking those common myths about meditation,
Okay. Yeah.
like that whole empty your mind thing.
Right.
Turns out it's not about that at all.
Yeah, it's really a common misconception. A lot of people think that, like, you have to go to some remote monastery and practice for years and years.
Oh, yeah.
But it's not the reality.
Not even close.
No.
This article, it compares thoughts to a flowing river.
Right.
You don't stop the river.
Right.
You just observe it,
Yeah.
which honestly feels way more doable, right?
Absolutely. It's not about, silencing your mind. It's just becoming aware of those thoughts.
Yeah.
And not getting swept away by them.
Okay, so more like watching clouds drift by.
Exactly.
You're not trying to like stop the clouds.
You just observe.
Just observe. Okay, that changes things.
Yeah.
It's not this like internal battle against my own thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
It's more about stepping back, just noticing.
Yeah.
But how does that actually like impact us? I mean, I get the like mental side of it,
Mm-hmm.
but this article highlights some major physical benefits too,
Okay.
like lowering blood pressure, which by the way, affects 1 billion people worldwide.
Wow.
1 billion. That's wild.
That is wild.
But how does simply observing your breath
Right.
impact something as like physical as blood pressure?
Yeah. Well, it's fascinating, right? It all comes down to stress.
Okay.
That constant tension, the to-do lists, all that, it triggers our body's fight or flight response.
Right.
And that's where cortisol comes in.
Okay, cortisol, that stress hormone we all know and love.
Exactly.
So how does meditation play into this whole
Yeah.
stress, cortisol, blood pressure situation?
Well, meditation helps us to become aware of that stress response as it's happening.
Oh, interesting.
So it's like we're hitting the pause button on autopilot.
Okay.
And instead of immediately reacting, with that surge of cortisol, we're creating space for a more balanced response.
Okay, so we're training ourselves to not go from 0 to 60.
Exactly.
The second, stress pops up.
Mhm.
Are there other physical benefits besides this whole blood pressure thing?
Yeah,
I
absolutely.
mean, 1 billion people is a pretty compelling statistic.
It is. It really highlights just how powerful managing stress can be.
Yeah.
The article also mentions a strengthened immune system,
Right.
which is huge.
Huge.
Plus less inflammation
Okay.
and even a reduction in chronic pain.
Wow.
All of which, again, can be linked back to chronic stress.
So it's not just about feeling a little calmer.
Right.
It's about equipping our bodies
Yeah.
to actually handle stress more effectively.
Exactly.
Which, let's be honest, who couldn't use a little help with that these days?
Exactly. And we're just scratching the surface here.
Oh, wow.
It's incredible what a few minutes of simply being present can do for both our mental and physical health.
Okay, so we talked about the physical benefits.
Yeah.
But what about, the impact on our minds?
Right.
This article suggests some pretty powerful mental benefits, too.
Yeah, it does.
It even says that meditation can actually change how our brains respond to stress.
Absolutely. And it's not just about feeling calmer in the moment.
Right.
It's about, rewiring our brains for greater resilience.
Okay, interesting.
When we meditate regularly,
Yeah.
we're essentially training ourselves to observe our thoughts and emotions without getting swept away by them.
So instead of just, totally spiraling into that anxiety tornado,
Exactly.
we learn to, just notice it. That honestly feels, revolutionary.
Yeah.
And also a little hard to believe.
It might seem too good to be true, but studies have actually shown
Okay.
that meditation can lead to physical changes in the brain, particularly in areas associated with stress, focus, and emotional regulation.
Okay, so there's actual science backing this up. We're not just talking about some, mystical mumbo jumbo.
Right, exactly.
But the article also mentions this, spiritual side to meditation.
Yeah.
And look, I'm all for exploring, different aspects of, well-being.
Of course, yeah.
But that word spiritual can sometimes feel a little vague.
I hear you. Spiritual doesn't have to mean subscribing to any specific religion or belief system. Think of it more as cultivating a deeper connection with yourself and the world around you.
Okay, so less about chanting and incense and more about tapping into something bigger.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that sense of interconnectedness, of being part of something larger than ourselves.
Okay.
And the article suggests that meditation can help us access that feeling.
It mentions developing intuition and a sense of oneness.
Yeah.
Which, honestly, that sounds pretty amazing in our chaotic world.
It does.
But how? How does simply sitting with our breath lead to those kinds of experiences?
It's interesting. When we quiet the constant chatter of our minds, it creates space for those subtler whispers of intuition to kind of come through. It's what's a good analogy? It's like tuning out the noise to hear a beautiful melody that was always playing in the background.
Okay, yeah.
You just couldn't hear it before.
Yeah, that's a really cool way to think about it.
Yeah.
So less internal noise, more inner wisdom.
Exactly.
But this all sounds great in theory, right?
Yeah.
How do we actually make meditation a part of our lives?
Yeah. So the good news is it's much simpler than you might think.
Okay.
The article actually provides this step-by-step guide.
Okay.
And it all starts with finding a comfortable position.
No need to contort myself into a pretzel.
No.
That's a relief.
Comfort is key.
Okay. So I find a comfy position.
Yep.
What's next?
Then you bring your attention to your breath.
Okay.
Notice the natural rhythm of each inhale and exhale.
Just tuning into the breath.
Got it.
What's next?
From there, you move into a body scan.
A body scan. Okay.
Yeah, so starting at your toes and moving up to the top of your head.
Okay.
Simply notice any sensations that are present.
So we're checking in.
Yeah, exactly.
With our physical selves.
Yeah.
Bringing awareness to, like, each part.
Exactly. Just noticing.
Okay. And what about those pesky thoughts that inevitably pop up?
That's where the practice comes in.
Okay.
When you notice a thought, just acknowledge it without judgment and gently guide your attention back to your breath.
Like watching those clouds drift by.
Exactly.
Don't engage. Just observe.
Yes.
And if we, find our minds racing, we just come back to the breath.
Exactly. Just return to the breath. It's like your anchor to the present moment.
Our anchor? I like that.
Yeah.
But I have to admit, even with these like simple steps, it still feels a little daunting. Like, what if I'm doing it wrong?
There's no right or wrong way to meditate.
That's like we're learning a new way of being with ourselves, not judging, just observing. That's actually kind of freeing when you think about it.
It is. Yeah. It is. And that's the beauty of meditation, right?
Yeah.
It's not about, achieving some kind of perfect state of bliss or anything like that. It's really about cultivating a more compassionate and understanding relationship with ourselves.
And that, my friend, is a practice I can get behind.
Right.
It's not about, like, becoming a meditation master overnight. It's about incorporating this into our lives in a way that, feels doable.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Even just a few minutes each day can have like a ripple effect,
Yeah.
It's not about, how long you do it for.
Right.
It's about the consistency.
And I love that this article, like, emphasizes that this is for everyone.
Yes.
You don't have to be a monk on a mountain or some kind of,
spiritual guru or something.
Spiritual guru, exactly.
Yeah.
It's accessible.
For everyone.
To anyone who wants, like, a little more peace in their lives.
Exactly. You don't need any special equipment, prior experience.
Roger.
It's just a willingness to show up for yourself and see what's possible, really.
And honestly, that's a really empowering message, right?
It is.
So as we kind of wrap up our deep dive on meditation here, what's like one big takeaway that you hope our listener walks away with today?
I think for me, it's that reminder that meditation isn't about stopping our thoughts.
Right.
Yeah. It's about changing our relationship to them. Right. It's about coming back to the present moment over and over again with kindness and curiosity.
Okay.
And in doing so, we open ourselves up to a world of possibilities, both internally and externally.
Love that.
Yeah. It's about realizing that the peace and clarity we seek are already within us, just waiting to be discovered.
It's beautifully said. It makes you think, if we can, like, approach our thoughts with that kind of awareness, even just for like a few minutes a day, how might that, like, ripple out into the rest of our lives? How might it change the way we, like, handle stress? Interact with others?
For sure.
Or even just, like, move through the world, something to ponder as you go about your day.
Hey everyone, and welcome to another deep dive. Today we're tackling something I know a lot of you have been really curious about. Self-appreciation.
Yeah, it's a big one.
And not like the look at me, I'm so great kind of self-appreciation, but that deeper question of, am I, like, inherently valuable?
Definitely.
We're diving into this Yvonne Spence blog post, Is It Okay to Appreciate Yourself? And honestly, it's kind of weird how giving ourselves a little pat on the back feels almost like taboo,
Yep.
Am I the only one who gets awkward about that?
No, not at all. In fact, that's exactly what Spence dives into right away, how much we crave this appreciation from other people.
Yeah.
But we don't give it to ourselves. That feeling when you work really hard on something and nobody seems to notice.
Ugh.
It's like we do that to ourselves constantly.
Ugh. Tell me about it. I once, like, slaved over this elaborate cake for hours, and my friend just took a bite. No reaction, no nothing.
Oh, that's the worst.
It was crushing.
Exactly. And Spence's point is, we do that to ourselves all the time, minimizing our efforts, downplaying our good qualities. She calls it a self-appreciation deficit. And honestly, it can really do a number on our relationships.
Hold on, wait. She's saying that not appreciating ourselves, like, hurts our relationships with other people.
That's exactly it.
Yeah.
Think about it. What do good relationships need to thrive?
Communication, trust.
Appreciation. Spence uses the example of marriages falling apart because someone feels completely unseen.
Whoa.
But we often neglect the most important relationship of all, the one we have with ourselves.
That's so true. We're so busy seeking validation from everyone else that we forget to give ourselves a little love.
Okay, but this is where Spence really got me thinking. She says, we have all these excuses for not appreciating ourselves. Like, we're worried about seeming arrogant or that people will like us less if we do.
It's a huge fear, right?
But seriously.
We're practically programmed to think that acknowledging our own strengths is like bragging or being narcissistic. But Spence has a really good counterpoint to that.
Okay, I'm listening.
She says it's about recognizing those qualities in ourselves, the good stuff, without comparing ourselves to others. Like, if you tell your kid they're your favorite,
right,
you're not saying they're objectively better than all other kids.
Yeah.
Just that you cherish them, quirks and...
Right. It's about appreciating our own unique strengths without making it a competition.
That makes so much sense. I think that's where the fear of seeming narcissistic comes in, right? It's not about putting others down to lift ourselves up. It's about recognizing our own worth.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And Spence actually brings in the work of Kristen Neff here. She's like the expert on self-compassion. And Neff makes this really important distinction between self-esteem, which is often based on like comparing yourself to others, and self-compassion, which is about acknowledging our shared human value. We all deserve compassion just for being human.
So it's not about inflating our egos. It's about treating ourselves with the same kindness and understanding we'd offer a friend.
Exactly. And celebrating our wins just like we'd celebrate theirs.
Okay, that's making a lot more sense now. But Spence also talks about how, especially for women, we tend to downplay our accomplishments. Why do we do that?
Oh, she's so spot on with that.
Yeah.
Have you ever noticed how often we apologize for our own ideas?
Oh my gosh, yes.
Like, this might be a silly idea, but...
100%. Or even just in casual conversations. I'm no expert, but it's like we're trying to shrink ourselves.
It's like we're preemptively apologizing for taking up space. And Spence suggests that it's partly because of societal expectations, especially for women. We're conditioned to be agreeable, non-threatening, even if it means dimming our own light.
That's kind of messed up when you think about it. Like, we've internalized these expectations without even realizing it.
Totally.
Yeah.
And what's really interesting is that Spence talks about how early experiences, like in childhood, can contribute to this. She argues that harsh criticism, even if it's unintentional, can lead us to internalize these negative beliefs about ourselves.
So if we're constantly told we're not good enough, we start to believe it.
It can really shape our self-perception, even if those beliefs aren't actually true.
That makes sense. It's like this inner critic that never shuts up, even when we're trying our best.
Exactly. And here's where it gets really interesting. Spence says that lack of self-appreciation doesn't just impact our self-esteem, it can actually sabotage our relationships too.
Wait, really? I thought we were saying how important appreciation is in relationships.
We are, but it works both ways. When we're constantly putting ourselves down, we tend to project that negativity onto others, even if we don't realize we're doing it.
Whoa. So it's not just about us feeling bad. It's about that negativity spilling over into how we interact with the people we care about most.
Exactly. Think about Julia and Adam, the couple from the blog post.
Yeah, Julia was the one who was late for something and snapped at her mom, right?
Right. And Adam was on that fishing trip and got into that argument with his wife over the phone. Remember what those two situations had in common?
They were both coming from a place of, like, insecurity.
Yes. Spence's point is that their own lack of self-appreciation was at the root of the issue.
Oh, wow. So they were taking their own negative self-perceptions and, like, unintentionally dumping them on the people closest to them.
That's exactly it. And that's why self-appreciation is so crucial. It's not about being self-absorbed. It's about recognizing our own worth so we can show up as our best selves in those relationships.
This is blowing my mind. So it's not just about us feeling good internally. It's about how that self-appreciation empowers us to actually do good in the world, in our relationships.
You got it.
Great. This is already making me rethink some of my own interactions.
Really?
I'm totally guilty of those self-deprecating comments, and now I'm thinking about how that might be affecting people around me.
It's a powerful realization, right? And it speaks to the ripple effect that self-appreciation can have, both in our own lives and in the lives of those around us.
Okay, you've convinced me self-appreciation is important, but how do we actually do that? How do we go from constantly criticizing ourselves to genuinely appreciating ourselves?
Well, that's where Spence gets really practical. And I promise you, it's not just about thinking positive thoughts.
Don't leave me hanging.
It goes much deeper than that. She says it's about recognizing our inherent worth, even with our flaws, and treating ourselves with the same appreciation we crave from others.
So not denying our shortcomings, but accepting ourselves, warts and all.
Exactly. It's about celebrating the effort, the little wins, and the qualities that make each of us unique.
Okay, I can get behind that. but it still seems a little daunting, Like, where do you even start with this whole self-appreciation thing?
Well, Spence tells this really relatable story in her post. She was feeling super resentful while she was, of all things, cleaning the kitchen.
Oh, been there.
Dishes everywhere, you know the drill.
The story of my life.
So she's there, up to her elbows in soapy water, and she starts having all these negative thoughts, blaming her family, feeling unappreciated.
Oh, yeah.
But then she remembers her own advice about self-appreciation.
Wait, so instead of stewing in those negative feelings, what did she do?
She makes this conscious shift. She chooses to appreciate herself for taking care of her home, for creating this nurturing space for her family.
Okay, so instead of focusing on what everyone wasn't doing, she focused on what she was doing.
Exactly. And you know what?
Yeah.
That simple shift completely changed her perspective. The resentment melted away, and she actually found this unexpected sense of peace, even joy, in cleaning.
Get out! She found joy in cleaning just by changing her mindset.
It just goes to show you, self-appreciation isn't just about feeling good. It's about changing our relationship with our experiences, even the mundane or challenging ones.
Wow, that's powerful. So it's not about pretending everything is perfect. It's about how we choose to respond to challenges, how we talk to ourselves when things get tough.
You've got it. And what I love about Spence's story is that it shows how even small acts of self-appreciation can ripple out and affect our well-being.
That's a good reminder. It doesn't have to be some big, complicated thing. It's about those little everyday choices that add up over time.
Absolutely.
Okay, I'm with you so far. Self-appreciation isn't about bragging rights. It's about recognizing our own inherent worth. But Spence doesn't just, drop this truth bomb and leave us hanging. She also digs into why it can be such a struggle to actually make that shift from self-criticism to self-appreciation.
Yeah, it's not always easy to flip that switch, is it?
Yeah.
Spence points out that we're often battling against years, sometimes decades, of ingrained beliefs and societal conditioning. It's a lot to unpack.
It's like we've internalized this message that acknowledging our own value is, attention-seeking or something. But Spence actually argues that true self-appreciation is the opposite of being self-absorbed.
Exactly. And she brings in this really interesting psychological insight to back that up.
Yeah.
She says that when we're actually comfortable with our own strengths and accomplishments, we're less likely to feel threatened by other people's successes.
Oh, that's interesting. So instead of seeing someone else's achievements as a reflection on our worth, we can just appreciate them for what they are.
Yes.
Celebrations of human potential.
Yes. Exactly. When we're secure in our own value, we can approach the world from a place of abundance, not scarcity.
Okay, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It's like that whole competitive mindset just kind of fades away when you're truly comfortable in your own skin.
And that shift in perspective can have this amazing ripple effect on our relationships too. Spence talks about how self-appreciation can actually make us more loving and supportive partners, friends, family members.
Really? How so? I would have thought being more self-focused would make you less attuned to other people's needs.
I know, it seems counterintuitive, but think about it. When we're constantly criticizing ourselves, we're way more likely to project those insecurities onto our loved ones.
So instead of offering support and encouragement, you might end up nitpicking or putting them down, even if you don't consciously mean to.
Exactly. Our own self-doubt can actually create this breeding ground for resentment, jealousy, conflict, all that stuff.
Wow.
But when we practice self-appreciation, we create this more positive, more compassionate inner dialogue.
And that allows us to show up for other people with more empathy, more understanding. It's like they say you can't pour from an empty cup.
Love that analogy. Self-appreciation is about filling our own cups so we have more love to share with others.
This is really making me rethink some of my own patterns in relationships. Spence is handing us this key to unlock healthier, more fulfilling connections, both with ourselves and with other people. But I'm curious, she also mentions how this lack of self-appreciation we're talking about can actually stem from childhood experiences.
She does. She talks about how early experiences, especially with caregivers and authority figures, can really shape our self-perception. Even small criticisms, if they're repeated often enough, can stick with us and affect how we see ourselves, sometimes for years.
So if you're constantly told you're not good enough or smart enough, those messages can become these self-fulfilling prophecies, even if they're not true.
Right. Our young minds are like sponges, soaking up everything around us, and that includes those negative messages. And sometimes they can become these deeply held beliefs that are hard to shake off.
It's like those early experiences create a blueprint for how we relate to ourselves and the world.
Absolutely.
And if that blueprint is based on criticism and self-doubt,
yeah,
it can be really hard to break free from those patterns.
It's not about blaming our parents or anything like that. It's about understanding how those early experiences might still be impacting us today, even if we're not aware of it.
Once you understand where those patterns come from, you can start to rewrite the script.
Exactly. Self-appreciation is about reclaiming your power. It's about choosing to define yourself based on your own values and aspirations, not the limitations that other people have put on you.
Okay, that's all well and good, but how do we actually do that? How do we go from understanding these concepts to actually living them? Because I am ready to ditch the self-criticism and embrace this whole self-appreciation thing, but it's like, where do I even begin?
I hear you. The good news is that Spence offers some really practical strategies for cultivating self-appreciation. And I promise, this isn't about toxic positivity or anything like that.
Okay, good, because that's not my style.
She stresses that it's a practice. It's something you have to cultivate over time, not a one-time fix.
Like building a muscle. The more you use it, the stronger it gets.
Exactly. You're creating new pathways in your brain, literally rewiring yourself to shift from those old patterns of self-criticism to something healthier.
Okay, I like where this is going. So what are some of the exercises we can do to strengthen that self-appreciation muscle?
Well, one of the most powerful is gratitude.
Gratitude. Okay, I've heard that one before. But how does focusing on what you're grateful for actually help you appreciate yourself? Fill me in.
So when we intentionally focus on the good in our lives, it shifts our perspective. We start to see things from a place of abundance instead of lack.
So instead of dwelling on your flaws, you're training your mind to focus on your strengths, the things you're grateful for.
Exactly. And that can be incredibly powerful in boosting your self-appreciation. It's like you're shining a spotlight on all the amazing things you already have going for you, which you might otherwise take for granted.
That's so true. I know I get caught up in that negative self-talk all the time.
It's just so easy to do.
Yeah. It's like always focusing on what's wrong, what I need to fix. I love this idea of shifting that focus to gratitude instead. What else you got?
Well, along similar lines, Spence talks about self-care.
Okay, self-care. That's another one of those buzzwords I hear everywhere, but honestly, I'm not always sure what it means in a practical sense.
Right. Is it just bubble baths and face masks?
That's what I'm saying.
Well, it can be that too.
Yeah.
But at its core, self-care is about prioritizing your own well-being. Physically, emotionally, and mentally. It's about treating yourself with the same kindness and compassion that you would offer a good friend.
So it's not selfish to prioritize your own needs. Yeah. Because I think a lot of us, myself included, really struggle with that. We feel guilty, like we should be doing something for someone else.
That's such a common misconception. And Spence actually addresses this head on. She says that when we prioritize self-care, we're actually better equipped to show up for other people in our lives.
Because if you're running on empty,
exactly,
you have nothing left to give.
You can't effectively care for others if you're not taking care of yourself first. It's like trying to give someone a glass of water when your own pitcher is bone dry.
Okay, that's a great analogy. But how do you even know what kind of self-care is right for you?
That's the beauty of it. It's totally personal. It's about tuning into your own needs and figuring out what makes you feel nurtured, energized, aligned.
So it's not a one-size-fits-all approach.
Not at all.
It's about experimenting, finding what works for you.
Exactly. For some people, it might be meditation or spending time in nature.
Yeah, yep.
For others, it might be a creative hobby or calling up a friend. It's really about giving yourself permission to do those things that nourish your mind, body, and spirit.
And giving yourself permission to say no to the things that don't.
Yes, exactly. And Spence argues that real self-care isn't just about indulging in pleasurable activities. It's also about setting healthy boundaries, saying no to things that drain you or don't align with your values.
Ooh. Okay, so it's about protecting your energy, making choices that support your overall well-being, even if they're not always easy or fun.
You got it. It's about recognizing that you deserve to be treated with respect by yourself and by others. And sometimes that means setting boundaries.
This is making me realize how often I give other people's needs and opinions more weight than my own. It's like this whole self-care thing is actually an act of self-respect.
Yes. It's about honoring your needs and creating a life that actually feels good to you. And speaking of honoring your needs, that brings us to another key aspect of self-appreciation that Spence talks about. Self-compassion.
Okay, self-compassion. We touched on that briefly earlier, but I'm ready to dive in a little deeper. How is that different from self-esteem again?
Right, so remember how we were talking about Kristen Neff's work? She's the one who makes that distinction between self-esteem, which is often based on like comparison and achievement.
Yeah.
And self-compassion, which is about treating yourself with kindness and understanding no matter what. It's not conditional on your successes or failures.
Right. Okay, that's coming back to me now. So how does that tie into self-appreciation?
Spence basically argues that self-compassion is one of the key ingredients. It's about recognizing that we're all imperfect human beings. And that's okay. We're all doing the best we can with what we have.
So instead of beating yourself up for your mistakes,
exactly,
you're learning to be kinder to yourself.
And more forgiving. Give yourself the same grace you would offer a loved one. And the cool thing is, research actually shows that self-compassion is linked to greater resilience, emotional well-being, even physical health.
Whoa, really? So not only does it feel better, but it's actually good for you.
It's true. Because think about it. When you're constantly criticizing yourself, it triggers your stress response, and that can have a really negative impact on your body over time. But when you practice self-compassion, you're activating those soothing systems, the ones that promote healing and well-being.
Wow, that is so cool. It's like literally good vibes only.
Right. It's about recognizing that you deserve love and kindness, no matter what, even, or maybe especially, when you mess up.
This is amazing. Okay, so we've got gratitude, self-care, self-compassion. What else does Spence recommend for boosting self-appreciation?
Well, she also talks about the importance of challenging those negative thoughts. Remember that inner critic we were talking about earlier?
Oh, believe me, I haven't forgotten. That voice can be brutal.
Tell me about it.
Yeah.
But the good news is you don't have to let that voice run the show.
Okay, good, because I am ready to put that voice on mute. So how do we do that? How do we quiet the peanut gallery in our minds?
One of the most effective techniques is actually really simple. You just notice when those thoughts come up. Spence calls it thought watching.
Thought watching. So you're just observing those negative thought patterns without judgment.
Exactly. It's like becoming a curious observer of your own mind. You're not trying to fight those thoughts or push them away. You're just noticing them as they arise.
Okay, I think I can do that. But then what? What do you do after you've noticed the thought?
That's where you get to challenge them. Spence suggests asking yourself some key questions like,
hit me with those questions.
Okay, well, first of all, is this thought even true?
Ooh, I like that.
What evidence do I have to support this? Would I say this to a good friend? And if not, what's a more helpful and compassionate way to think about this?
Wow, those are such powerful questions. It's like taking those negative thoughts to court, you know?
Right.
Seeing if they hold up under scrutiny.
And often, when you really examine them, you realize they're based on fear or insecurity or just plain old programming, not reality.
This is amazing. So by shining a light on those negative thoughts, by actually questioning them, we can start to create a more positive and empowering internal dialogue.
Exactly. And that shift in thinking can ripple out into every area of your life.
I'm starting to realize how much power we have over our own thoughts. Like, we really can choose what we focus on. It's just about training ourselves to do it.
And Spence reminds us, it's a journey. You're not going to be perfect at this overnight.
Oh, good, because I'm definitely a work in progress.
It's about coming back to those practices again and again with compassion and patience for yourself.
I love this conversation. But you know what? I'm also kind of curious to hear more about what Spence has to say about like transforming our relationship with that inner critic. Because honestly, I'd love to just make friends with that part of myself already.
That's a great goal. And Spence actually offers some really practical advice on that.
Yeah.
She suggests that instead of trying to silence the inner critic, you actually befriend it.
Befriend your inner critic. Okay, now that sounds a little counterintuitive.
It does. But stick with me here.
Okay.
A lot of times, that inner critic, it's actually trying to protect you, even if it's going about it in a kind of unhelpful way.
So it's like that well-meaning but overprotective friend who tries to keep you safe by pointing out all the things that could go wrong.
Exactly. And sometimes the best way to deal with that friend is just to acknowledge their perspective without letting it dictate your actions.
That is such a good point. So instead of getting defensive, you just thank that part of yourself for trying to look out for you.
Exactly. You can say something like, thanks for looking out for me, inner critic, but I've got this.
I love that. It's like acknowledging their good intentions while also asserting your own power and agency.
Exactly. And Spitz says that this takes practice, of course. Just like any relationship, building a healthier relationship with your inner critic requires time, patience, and a whole lot of self-compassion.
This is all starting to make so much more sense now. It's not about silencing that voice entirely. It's about changing how we relate to it.
Exactly.
And that can make such a big difference.
Absolutely. So much of this work is about changing our perspective.
It really is. And it's about remembering that you're not alone in this journey. We all have that inner critic. It's part of being human.
That's such an important reminder. We all have those voices in our heads. It's what we do with them that matters.
Okay, so we've talked about gratitude, self-care, self-compassion, befriending our inner critics. How do we actually start putting all of this into practice? What are some concrete things we can do to cultivate more self-appreciation starting today?
Such a good question. The good news is Spence offers a ton of practical tips.
Okay, lay 'em on me.
Well, one simple but powerful practice is to start a gratitude journal.
A gratitude journal. Okay, tell me more. What is that?
It's just what it sounds like. It's a notebook or even just a note on your phone where you jot down all the things you're grateful for, big and small.
So every day, take a few minutes to think about all the good stuff in your life, even the little things.
Exactly. And it doesn't have to be anything fancy. You could write down things like, I'm grateful for my morning coffee. I'm grateful for my dog's wagging tail. I'm grateful for this sunny weather.
I love that.
And research shows that practicing gratitude can actually make a real difference in our happiness, our well-being, even our physical health.
Wow, okay. Sign me up for a gratitude journal. What else?
Another great practice is positive self-talk.
Okay, positive self-talk. So we're talking about those affirmations like, I am strong, I am powerful, I am beautiful, that kind of thing.
Exactly. It might feel a little silly at first, I know. But there's actually a lot of science that shows how powerful affirmations can be. When we repeat those positive statements about ourselves, even if we don't fully believe them at first,
Right.
it can actually start to rewire our brains and change how we see ourselves for the better.
That is so cool. It's like you're planting these seeds of self-love and then watching them grow.
I love that analogy. And the more you nurture those seeds with positive self-talk, the more likely they are to blossom into genuine self-appreciation.
Okay, I'm definitely trying that one. Gratitude journal, positive self-talk. What else?
This one's important. Celebrate your accomplishments no matter how small.
Okay, so what, like throw myself a party every time I remember to take out the recycling?
Well, you don't have to go that far, but you get the idea. It's about recognizing and acknowledging your wins instead of just brushing past them or minimizing them.
I think a lot of us, myself included, are guilty of that. We're so focused on what we haven't done yet that we forget to celebrate how far we've come.
Totally. It's so easy to get stuck in that cycle. But when you make a conscious effort to celebrate those wins, even the small ones, it reinforces those positive beliefs about yourself.
Oh, that's a good point. It's like giving yourself permission to feel proud of yourself.
Exactly. And that can give you the motivation to keep going, to keep striving.
This is great. Okay, so we've got gratitude, positive self-talk, celebrating our accomplishments. Anything else?
One more thing. Surround yourself with supportive people.
Yes, because, let's be real, not everyone is going to be on board with this whole self-appreciation journey.
That's true. And it's important to remember that not everyone has to understand. You don't have to convert everyone to your way of thinking.
It's more about recognizing who your cheerleaders are.
Exactly. Prioritize those relationships with people who lift you up, encourage you, and celebrate your wins. And don't be afraid to set boundaries with the people who bring you down.
It's like they say, you are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with.
Exactly. You become like the people you surround yourself with. So choose wisely. And remember, you have the power to choose.
This has been such an eye-opening conversation. I'm starting to see how interconnected this all is. Self-appreciation really is woven into every part of our lives. Our thoughts, our relationships, our health.
It affects everything.
It really does. But before we wrap up this part of our deep dive, I've got one more question for you. We've talked a lot about the positive side of self-appreciation, but what about when things get tough? Because, let's face it, life isn't always sunshine and roses.
That's so true.
We all make mistakes, we all face challenges, disappointments. How do we apply these principles of self-appreciation when we're struggling?
That's such an important question. And Spence acknowledges that setbacks are a part of life. We're all going to stumble from time to time, and that's okay. It's actually how we respond to those challenges that matters most.
So instead of letting those setbacks define us, we can actually use them as opportunities for growth and learning.
Exactly. She talks about the importance of self-compassion, especially when we're struggling. Remember those questions we were talking about earlier about challenging those negative thoughts?
Yeah.
Those are even more crucial when you're facing a setback. Instead of beating yourself up, approach the situation with curiosity and compassion. Ask yourself those same questions. Is this thought true? What can I learn from this experience? That kind of thing.
So instead of asking, what's wrong with me? You're asking, what can I learn from this?
Exactly. And that small shift in perspective can make a world of difference. It allows you to view these challenges as opportunities rather than failures.
That is so empowering. It's like we actually have a choice in how we respond to any situation, no matter how difficult it may seem. We get to decide what that situation means for us.
And part of that is remembering that your worth doesn't change. Even when you make a mistake, you are still worthy of love and compassion no matter what.
Oh, I love that. That is such a powerful message. Okay, so that's how we handle setbacks. But what about when the criticism is coming from other people? Because sometimes, even when we're trying to practice self-appreciation, we might encounter people who aren't exactly on board.
That's true. Not everyone is going to get it, and that's okay. Spence talks about how to navigate criticism from others, and one of the most important things to remember is that not everyone's opinion of you is a reflection of your worth.
So just because someone criticizes you, it doesn't mean they're right.
Right. You don't have to take it personally. It's good to remember that criticism often says more about the person giving it than it does about you.
Ooh, that's a good point.
Right. Sometimes that criticism is coming from a place of their own insecurity or their own stuff.
Yeah, like hurt people hurt people.
Exactly. And so when you get that criticism, Spence suggests you hit the pause button and ask yourself a few questions. First of all, is this feedback coming from a place of love and support? And if not, is there any truth to this? And is there anything I can learn from it, even if it wasn't delivered in the most helpful way?
I love that. So you're kind of sifting through the criticism to see if there's anything valuable there for you without letting it bring you down.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You always have a choice in how you respond. You can choose to take it personally, or you can choose to see it as an opportunity for growth.
This is so great. It's like Spence is giving us permission to set boundaries and protect our energy, even with the people we care about.
Because you deserve to be treated with respect by yourself and everyone else. And sometimes that means setting those boundaries.
Okay, this is all starting to really click for me now. Self-appreciation isn't just about feeling good. It's about recognizing your inherent worth and then living a life that reflects that.
Yes.
You got it.
But even when we're trying our best to practice all of this, sometimes those negative thoughts still creep in.
Oh, they do. And Spence says that's totally normal. We all have those thoughts, even those of us who've been practicing self-appreciation for years.
So it's not about like never having a negative thought ever again.
It's about changing your relationship with those thoughts.
Oh, okay. So how do we do that?
She has this analogy that I love. Think of negative thoughts like clouds passing through the sky.
Clouds. You notice them, you acknowledge them, but you don't have to let them define you or dictate your actions. Just like a cloud can't block out the sun forever, those negative thoughts don't have to control your life.
I love that analogy. So we're not trying to get rid of the clouds altogether. We're just learning to coexist with them, to see them for what they are, temporary.
Exactly. And when those thoughts do come up, you meet them with self-compassion.
Right. Because beating yourself up for having a negative thought is just going to make you feel worse.
It's like adding fuel to the fire. Instead, try to respond with kindness. Remind yourself that you're doing the best you can, and that these thoughts are just thoughts, they're not facts.
This has been such an insightful conversation. I feel like I have a whole new toolkit for dealing with those pesky negative thoughts.
I'm so glad to hear that. It's about equipping yourself with those tools and then remembering to use them, especially when things get tough.
Okay, so to sum up this part of our deep dive, self-appreciation is an ongoing practice. It's about being kind to ourselves, celebrating our wins, and learning to navigate those inevitable challenges with grace and compassion.
Beautifully said. You've really hit the nail on the head.
Wow, okay. I feel like my brain is doing backflips right now.
Yeah.
That was a lot of really good stuff. But
a lot to digest, right?
Yeah. But before we wrap up, I'm curious, does Spence give any concrete examples of how this whole self-appreciation thing actually plays out in real life? Because it's one thing to talk about the concepts,
right?
But I always find it helpful to hear those relatable stories,
Cool.
The ones that really bring it home.
Me too. And luckily, Spence delivers. She tells this story about a time when she was feeling super overwhelmed and kind of resentful, actually. Picture this. She's cleaning the kitchen after a long day, dishes piled up in the sink.
Ugh, I've been there.
Right, so she's elbow deep in soapy water, and all these negative thoughts start to creep in. Blaming her family for not helping, feeling unappreciated.
Yeah.
That whole spiral.
Yep, I know that spiral well. It's so easy to go down that rabbit hole.
The worst, right. But here's the thing. Instead of letting those negative thoughts take over, Spence actually stops and remembers her own advice about self-appreciation.
Ooh, okay. I love when that happens. So what did she do?
She makes this conscious choice to shift her focus.
Yeah.
So instead of focusing on what everyone else wasn't doing,
yeah,
she chooses to appreciate herself for what she was doing.
Okay, so she's appreciating herself for taking care of her home, for creating a nice space for her family.
Exactly. And guess what happened?
Okay, I need to know. Don't leave me hanging.
So in that moment, when she shifted her perspective like that, she felt this huge wave of peace, like the resentment just melted away. And she actually found herself finding joy in cleaning.
Wait, she found joy in cleaning?
I know, right? Sounds crazy. But it's true. It's like she transformed this mundane chore into something almost meditative just by changing her internal dialogue.
That is wild. It's like they say, change your thoughts, change your life.
Exactly. And I think Svence's story is a perfect example of that. It's not about denying reality or pretending that everything is perfect. It's about choosing how we show up for those experiences, even the challenging ones.
I love that. It's so empowering. It means we have way more control over our own happiness than we realize.
100%. And, what I find really inspiring about Spence's story is that it wasn't about some grand gesture or some big, elaborate self-care routine.
Right.
It was about finding a moment of gratitude in the middle of an ordinary day.
That's such a good point. It doesn't have to be complicated. It's about those small, everyday choices that add up over time.
Exactly. And those small choices, they can make a world of difference.
This has been such an incredible conversation. I feel like I've learned so much. And honestly, I'm really inspired to start putting some of these practices into action in my own life.
That's wonderful to hear. And remember, self-appreciation, it's not a destination, it's a journey. Some days will be easier than others. But the important thing is to just keep coming back to the things that nourish your soul, the things that remind you of your own worthiness. You got this.
Thank you so much for joining us today, and a huge thank you to Yvonne Spence for sharing her wisdom and insights with us.
She's amazing.
And to our amazing listeners, remember, you are worthy, you are loved, and you are capable of amazing things. Until next time, keep shining.
All right, ready to dive into some juicy emotional mastery? We're talking the Sedona Method today. And what better place to unpack it than a good old actualize.org forum discussion?
Yeah, these forum discussions can be gold mines.
Seriously. Real people, real experiences. Plus, Leo's a fan of the Sedona Method, so it's got to be good.
Definitely adds that extra layer of credibility, right?
Absolutely. And speaking of real people, we meet Little Yoga in the forum. They're like knee-deep in the Sedona Method. They've got all 18 CDs.
Wow. Committed.
Right. But they're hitting walls. Like, okay, what now? Do I just keep hitting replay on these things?
Haha, I can see it. That initial excitement kind of wears off, and then it's like, wait, how do I actually apply this in my life?
Exactly. Plus, they weren't really vibing with the whole CD format. They found it a bit chaotic,
Makes sense. Everyone learns differently. Some people thrive on that kind of energy, others not so much.
Right, like maybe cracking open the book instead.
Exactly. And that's where average investor pops in, singing the praises of the good old-fashioned book.
Yeah, they went full-on bookworm mode, a whole hour every day dedicated to practicing the techniques.
Talk about dedication.
Right. And here's the kicker. They start talking about reaching this high-energy state. Okay, now you've got my attention.
Yeah, that's a pretty compelling testimonial, isn't it? Speaks to the power of consistent practice.
It's like they unlocked some secret energy level or something. Reminds me, got to get back to my own practice.
It's easy to get caught up in the theory, but the real magic happens when you put it into practice, consistently.
Totally. Okay, so for those who are new to this whole Sedona Method thing, Hyruga swoops in with this super clear, concise explanation.
Oh yeah, Hyruga's breakdown is great, gets right to the heart of it.
It's like a 4-step roadmap to emotional freedom. And the best part, it's surprisingly simple.
Deceptively simple, you could say. Because while the steps themselves are straightforward, the impact they can have is profound.
Okay, so walk us through it. What are these 4 magical steps?
All right, so step 1, you're identifying the feeling you want to let go of.
Okay, so if I'm feeling anxious, for example, I would name that feeling specifically.
Exactly. You're bringing awareness to it. And that's key because you can't change what you don't acknowledge, right?
Makes sense. So what's step 2?
Step 2 is where it gets interesting. You ask yourself, could I let this go? And it's important to emphasize could, not should.
Ooh, I like that. It's about choice.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that you have the power to choose how you want to feel.
Okay, that's empowering. So it's not about forcing ourselves to feel a certain way. It's about exploring the possibility of letting go. What's next?
All right, so step 3 gets even deeper. You ask yourself, Can I allow this feeling to be here? Can I even welcome it?
Wait, welcome it. Isn't the whole point to get rid of the feeling?
That's where it gets interesting, because often our resistance to the feeling is what keeps us stuck. By welcoming it, we're actually creating space for it to move through us.
That's a different way of looking at it.
It's like holding a beach ball underwater. The more you resist, the more it wants to pop up. But if you just let it float, it loses its power over you.
Wow, that's a great analogy. So we're not trying to suppress our emotions, we're creating space for them. What's the final step?
Okay, so step 4 is about taking action. You ask yourself, would I let this go? Am I truly willing? And most importantly, when?
The when is interesting. It's like setting an intention to release the feeling.
Exactly. It's about moving from a passive state to an active state of letting go.
Wow. So simple, yet so powerful. It's like Haruga just handed us the keys to the emotional kingdom.
Right. But, and this is important, like with any tool, it's how you use it that makes all the difference. And that brings us to Hawkins, who shares a really insightful perspective.
Oh, yeah. Hawkins brings up a really good point about not getting too caught up in the mechanics of the method.
Right.
Yes. They found that simply repeating the questions without really feeling into them became just another layer of mental noise, which is kind of ironic, right? The whole point is to quiet the mind, not add more chatter.
Exactly. It's not just about going through the motions. It's about engaging with the process fully, with intention and awareness.
So it's not enough to just intellectually understand the steps. You have to really connect with them on an emotional level.
Exactly. And that's where visualization can be a really powerful tool, something that Leo talks about a lot.
Right. And Hawkins actually mentions how powerful it can be to visualize that desired feeling state. Like, if you want to feel peace, you actually imagine yourself feeling peaceful.
Absolutely. Because it's one thing to think, I want to let go of this anger, but it's another thing entirely to actually connect with that feeling of peace and embody it.
It's like instead of focusing on the mud you're stuck in, you're envisioning yourself stepping onto solid ground, feeling that sense of relief and freedom.
Beautifully said. And that brings us to another crucial point that For Moderator Universe emphasizes, which is the importance of feeling into the body.
Oh, yes, this is where the rubber meets the road, right?
Exactly, because emotions aren't just abstract thoughts living in our heads, they manifest physically in our bodies.
So if I'm feeling anxious, it's not enough to just think I'm anxious. I need to notice that knot in my stomach, the tightness in my chest, right?
Exactly. By bringing awareness to those physical sensations, we can start to release their hold on us.
It's like giving those emotions permission to exist without letting them take over the whole party.
I love that. And while the basic steps of the Sedona Method are incredibly powerful, Universe also highlights how working with experienced coaches or exploring the nuances of our emotions can lead to even deeper releases.
Okay, so it's like the Sedona Method is a powerful tool, but there are different levels of mastery. You can start with the basics and then go deeper as you become more comfortable.
Precisely. It's like learning an instrument. You can start by learning a few chords, but with consistent practice and maybe some guidance from a teacher, you can eventually play complex and beautiful music.
And sometimes having that teacher, that experienced guide, can make all the difference in helping you fine-tune your technique and unlock your full potential.
Absolutely. And that's where the real magic happens, when you move beyond the surface level and start to delve into the deeper layers of yourself.
It's like peeling back the layers of an onion, right?
Exactly. You start with that initial emotion, but underneath there might be a whole tapestry of beliefs, past experiences, and hidden patterns that are driving those emotional responses.
It's like suddenly you're not just reacting to life, you're actually understanding the why behind your reactions.
Yes. And that's where the real transformation happens. You move from a place of reactivity to a place of conscious choice and emotional freedom.
And that's the beauty of the Sedona Method, right?
Yeah.
It gives you the tools to become the master of your own inner world.
Exactly. So for everyone listening, here's the key takeaway. The Sedona Method is a journey, not a destination. It's about finding what works for you, experimenting with different techniques, and most importantly, committing to the practice of emotional awareness.
And remember, it's okay to start small. You don't have to tackle every negative emotion at once. Choose one feeling you'd like to release, maybe that persistent self-doubt or that lingering resentment, and apply those Sedona Method steps.
It's like flexing a new muscle. At first, it might feel a little awkward or unfamiliar, but with consistent practice, it becomes second nature. You start to notice those negative emotions arising, and you have the tools to meet them with awareness and choice.
Because ultimately, this is about living with more presence, more joy, and more peace. It's about experiencing the fullness of life without being held back by limiting beliefs and emotional baggage.
Beautifully said. So as you go about your day today, remember this. You have the power to choose how you respond to life's challenges. You have the power to let go of what no longer serves you. And you have the power to create a life filled with more peace, joy, and emotional freedom.
Okay, so Hairuga lays out these 4 steps, and honestly, it just clicks. Like, it makes so much sense.
Right. It's beautifully simple, yet so powerful. So, step 1, you identify that feeling you want to release. Maybe it's anxiety, frustration, just whatever's got you feeling stuck.
Got it. Name it to tame it, right?
Exactly.
Okay.
Then you ask yourself, could I let this go? And it's important to emphasize could, not should.
Ooh, I like that. It's about choice, isn't it?
Precisely. It's about recognizing that you have a choice in how you feel. You're not stuck with these emotions.
Okay, that's empowering. I like that. So it's not about forcing yourself to feel a certain way. It's about exploring the possibility of letting go. What's next?
All right, so step 3 gets even deeper. You ask yourself, can I allow this feeling to be here? Can I even welcome it?
Wait, welcome it. Isn't the point to get rid of the feeling?
That's where it gets really interesting. Because often our resistance to the feeling, that's what actually keeps us stuck. So by welcoming it, we're kind of creating that space for it to move through us.
Okay, that's a different way of looking at it. I'm intrigued.
It's like imagine holding a beach ball underwater. You know, the more you resist, the more it wants to just pop back up in your face. But if you just let it float, it kind of loses its power over you.
Wow, that's a great analogy. I can really picture that. So we're not trying to suppress or ignore these emotions. We're just creating space for them to be there without controlling us.
Exactly. And then that brings us to the final step, which is all about, taking action. So you ask yourself, would I let this go? Am I truly willing? And then most importantly, when?
The when is interesting. It's like setting an intention, right? Like I'm not just thinking about letting go, I'm actually committing to it.
Exactly. It's about moving from that passive state to an active state of letting go. It's a powerful shift.
Wow. So simple, yet so powerful. It's like Hairuga just handed us the keys to the emotional kingdom. But like with any tool, it's all about how you use it, right?
100%. And that's where, Hawkins comes in with this really insightful perspective.
Oh, yeah. Hawkins brings up a good point about not getting, too caught up in the mechanics of the method.
Yes. Like they found that just blindly repeating the questions without really feeling into them, it just became another layer of mental noise.
Which is kind of ironic, right? When the whole point is to quiet the mind, not just add more chatter.
Exactly. It's not enough to just, intellectually understand the steps. You have to really connect with them on an emotional level. You have to feel it.
So it's not enough to just go through the motions. You have to really be present with the process.
Exactly. And that's where, visualization can be such a powerful tool, something that Leo talks about a lot.
Right. And Hawkins actually mentions how powerful it can be to visualize that desired feeling state. Like if you want to feel peace, you actually close your eyes and imagine yourself feeling peaceful.
Absolutely. Because it's one thing to think, oh, I want to let go of this anger, but it's a completely different experience to actually connect with that feeling of peace, to embody it.
It's like instead of focusing all your energy on the mud and the muck you're stuck in, you're shifting your focus. You're envisioning yourself stepping onto solid ground, feeling that sense of relief, that freedom.
Beautifully said. And that actually brings us to another point that forum moderator Universe emphasizes, which is the importance of feeling into the body.
Oh, yes. This is where the rubber meets the road, right?
Exactly. Because, emotions, they're not just these abstract thoughts that are living up in our heads somewhere. They manifest physically in our bodies. We feel them in our bodies.
So if I'm feeling anxious, it's not enough to just have the thought, okay, I'm anxious. I need to actually notice that knot in my stomach, that tightness in my chest, that kind of thing, right?
Exactly. Because by bringing awareness to those physical sensations, that's how we can start to, release their hold on us.
Yeah, it's like giving those emotions permission to exist without, letting them take over the entire party.
Yes, I love that. And, while the basic steps of the Sedona Method are super powerful in themselves, Universe also points out how working with experienced coaches, really exploring the nuances of our emotions can lead to even deeper releases.
Okay, so it's like the Sedona Method is this powerful tool, but there are these different levels of mastery, right? Like you can start with the basics, but then as you become more comfortable, you can go deeper and deeper.
Precisely. It's like learning an instrument, You might start by just learning a few basic chords, but with consistent practice and maybe some guidance from a teacher, you can eventually play these complex and beautiful pieces of music.
Yeah, and sometimes, having that teacher, that experienced guide, it can make all the difference in helping you to fine-tune your technique and unlock your full potential.
Absolutely. And that's where the real magic happens, when you can move beyond that surface level and start to really delve into the deeper layers of yourself.
Yeah, it really is like peeling back the layers of an onion, like you said. You start with that surface level emotion, but then underneath, there's like this whole web of beliefs and past experiences. It's kind of wild when you think about it.
Totally. It's in those deeper layers that you really start to understand what makes you tick. Yeah. You know what I mean? You start to see the connections between your past and how you're reacting to things in the present.
It's like all of a sudden you're not just going through life on autopilot.
Yeah.
You're actually like understanding the why behind your reactions.
Yeah, exactly. And that's where that real transformation happens, right? When you move from just reacting to consciously choosing how you want to respond.
Exactly. And that's what's so cool about the Sedona method.
Yeah.
It's like it gives you that power. It puts you back in the driver's seat.
It really does.
Yeah.
So for everyone listening out there, remember this. The Sedona method, it's a journey, not a destination. You're not going to achieve emotional mastery overnight, right?
Totally. It's about finding what works for you. Experimenting with the different techniques and sticking with it even when it feels a little awkward or uncomfortable.
Exactly. Like learning any new skill, it takes practice. But the more you do it, the easier it gets.
And I think that's an important point to end on. It's okay to start small. You don't have to try to tackle all your emotional baggage at once.
Definitely not. Pick one thing, one feeling you want to work on and just start there.
Exactly. Maybe it's that self-doubt that keeps creeping in, or that frustration that seems to pop up at the worst possible times.
Whatever it is, just start. Apply those Sedona Method steps, feel into it, and see what happens.
It's all about taking those baby steps one at a time until you're like, hey, I'm actually feeling lighter. I'm feeling more free.
Exactly. And the coolest part, the more you do it, the more natural it becomes. It's like you're building this emotional muscle, getting stronger and more resilient with each release.
It's like you're slowly but surely creating this whole new way of being in the world. One where you're not controlled by your emotions, but rather you're in control of them.
Now that's true freedom. So, as you go about your day-to-day, remember this. You have the power within you to choose how you respond to life. You have the power to let go of what's no longer serving you. And you have the power to create a life that's filled with more peace, more joy, and true emotional freedom.
Beautifully said. And on that empowering note, it's time for us to wrap up this deep dive. Until next time, happy releasing, everyone.